sudden in his writings, there is this universal vision of men and women all called into the praise of God. I think that it is profoundly rooted in what he observed first in Damietta among Muslim men and women. And then this insight gets translated into his own writing to all Christian men and women. He writes a letter which we call the Letter to All the Faithful, in which he urges every man and woman in the world to pray.
In another letter, he writes, perhaps a herald could go through the town announcing time for prayer.
He says that you must make Christians stop every day and pray together wherever they are. The biggest indication that Francis was changed by his encounter with Sultan Al-Kamil is that he rewrote the rule of his order, its code of conduct, its constitution, really, to say to his friars that you can go and live in peace among Muslims.
You could not have a saintly figure who is willing to see the goodness in non-Christians.
Guard.
Pelagius is within a few days' march of Cairo. His only thought now is to defeat Al-Kamil and take Egypt.
The Crusaders thought that they got it made. They were marching towards Cairo. What could stop them now? The answer is the Nile.
The Nile is rising, and they've made camp here on the floodplain.
The Crusader army does penetrate deeper into Egypt, but doesn't know the terrain, doesn't understand these networks of canals that they have, and this river, this ancient river, which can be raised and lowered.
Al-Kamil ordered the sluice gates open, and he flooded the country.
They go to sleep one night and ready for battle, and the next day, they're flooded. They're in mud up to their waists.
Your Holiness, we are defeated.
This is it. They've left us no choice. And you know it.
All the generals told him, let's go for the kill.
The encounter of Francis with the Sultan Malik al-Kamil is probably best portrayed as an encounter of faith. It was a faith exchange. It wasn't so much an intellectual debate, but it was an exchange of two men of faith testifying to how God has led them to this point in their lives. And each seemed, according to the testimonies, okay to listen to the other's perspective and allow God to be God in the lives of both of them.
Surrounded by the floodwaters, they must have been going down like flies with plague and all the problems that you have when I've got a large army camped out on flooded ground.
They can't fight. They're surrounded. The Muslim army could kill them all at will.
He realized that the Crusaders are now in a very dire situation. They had starvations in their camp. They are surrounded by mud. They can't escape. So he orders 50,000 loaves of bread sent to them every day and 1,100 bushels of barley for the animals.
The Sultan was moved by such compassion that for many days he freely fed us as we were dying of hunger. Who can doubt that such kindness, mildness, and mercy proceeded from God?
Francis wants, once again, to write. He writes what we call the praises of God. He names the attributes of God that he's giving praise for. And he says things like, you are mercy, you are forgiveness, you are compassion.
What's remarkable about that is that it's the very way that Muslims invoke the 99 beautiful names of God.
The 99 names of God are attributes of God. For example, the merciful, the compassionate, are the qualities embodied by God, are the ways in which God interacts with creation. And Muslims recite and meditate upon these divine names as a means of self-transformation.
The Crusaders surrendered control of Damietta and returned to Europe. Pelagius' dream of conquering Egypt was over. A few years later, he lost another war against the Christian king who refused to send troops to the crusade. Shortly after that final defeat, Pelagius died. Oliver of Paderborn returned to Germany, never again taking up the trade of war. John of Brienne gave his wealth to the Franciscan order. He was buried wearing the simple robes of a friar. Al-Kamil's act of humanity marked the beginning of the end of the terrible period of conflict known as the Crusades.
People are less anxious to sign up for crusading. They were no longer convinced that Islam was the implacable enemy of Christendom. Another reason being the emphasis on the God that Christ preached. The loving God, the God who forgives, becomes much more important.
You are love. You are charity. You are our hope.
Francis died 7 years after Damietta. 2 years later, the church declared him a saint.
Loving. The guide to the right path. The all-forgiving. The merciful. The compassionate.
Al-Kamil ruled for 20 more years. His reign was marked by fairness towards the Christians of Egypt. He buried his mother in the mausoleum of a famous Muslim scholar he studied as a boy. Bloodshed and war didn't end with the Sultan and St. Francis. Angry, dehumanizing words spark violence today as before. Transcending differences. The road to peace runs through the common humanity that we all share. The Sultan and the Saint was made possible by the generous support of these institutions and individuals.